As I mentioned in my opening statements, having been involved in this a little while, back in 2003 when we did one of the first FAA reauthorizations, there was nothing in the bill. It's amazing how technology does change our lives, and it's amazing how government does fail to keep up with changes in technology and craft the law to match that. We fall further and further behind, it seems. In 2012, when we did the last FAA reauthorization, I tried to get specific and hold people's feet to the fire. And we do that by putting some milestones and deadlines. And in the law, we said, for example, Mr. Whitaker, we said, required planning for integration. This is the law that was passed. A comprehensive plan not later than 270 days after the enactment of this act, the Secretary of Transportation consultation with representatives of aviation and federal agencies basically would come up with the plan. Was that deadline met?
Yes, sir. Both a comprehensive plan and a 5-year roadmap were developed. They were both published in November of 2013.
2013. Okay. To further hold the feet to the fire, and some things have been done, as we pointed out and I mentioned earlier, we put a deadline. The plan required under paragraph 1 shall provide the safe integration of civil unmanned aviation systems into the national airspace as soon as practicable, but not later than September 30th, 2015. That's the deadline we put in there. Is that deadline going to be met?
Well, you certainly won't have full integration of UAS.
But the deadline is not going to be met?
No.
Okay. When do you predict the deadline will be met?
Well, we're taking the issue in manageable bites, if you will.
Yeah, and you testified that you're granting exemptions and waivers at a pretty rapid rate. Would you say 50 a week or something?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but that's not what we intended. We intended for basically to have the rule in place by September. It's not going to be met. Now we're going to do an FAA bill, guys and gals, and we should hold their feet to the fire again. I don't know how you hold the feet to the fire because we've missed the deadline that we set in here, but we're going to have to do something. Is there something we're missing that that we haven't done that could provide you with the assets to move forward or make certain this happens as soon as possible? And what's your deadline now?
We have broken the task into pieces, if you will.
When will it be done? What was directed by law?
So the rule was issued earlier this year in February. Comments were closed in April. We've received 4,500, approximately 4,500 comments.
All that's part of the record. When will we be done?
So the rule, we have to adjudicate those comments. We'll clear the rule out by the end of the year.
16, 17?
The rule will be in place within the year.
Within a year.
That's correct.
So, but, okay, mark that down, staff. We could do a hearing a year from now and see if they've completed the task. The problem we have in the meantime is, again, you're granting exceptions and waivers. It's sort of a spotty policy that's in place. And some folks talked about addressing risks, and that's the most important thing, wouldn't you say, is avoiding risks?
Safety is certainly our priority, yes.
But by the same token, we're falling a little bit further behind than some of the other countries. Mr. Meisner, what have you seen? This hearing's about commercialization and moving forward. Are we, as the U.S., falling further behind? I cited $10 billion, I guess $1 billion a year for the next 10 years we would lose by not having commercial rules in place for operation of drones.
U.S. planning is not as aggressive, Mr. Chairman, as it is in other countries.
Okay. But there are a host of issues, privacy, and we had this little question here with the staff and some of us. Who basically is in charge of setting the rules for privacy? Is it the individual states and law enforcement? Is it the Department of Justice? Is this an FAA responsibility in the rules that you're crafting? Mr. Whitaker, maybe you could shed some light on how we protect people's privacy.
The President issued a presidential memorandum
Right.
in February designating the National Telecommunication Information Administration as the lead on this issue. They have opened for public comment. I think that has closed. We are certainly a stakeholder in this conversation, but we do.
So we need to call them and ask them when they'll have their rules in place for protecting privacy.
They have the lead on this issue.
But it is multi-jurisdictional. It's beyond just the federal level to protect privacy, isn't it?
Aviation has always been a federal initiative and preemptive of state authorities, and I would assume.
Well, a drone that's operating under 500 feet, whose responsibility would that be? Also federal, or can you? I mean, local law enforcement is already using some devices, and other folks are using it. Who controls the and that's probably the biggest concern of privacy, is somebody within 500 feet over people's homes, property, surveillance capability of these drones.
Yeah, by statute, even at those altitudes, it's federal airspace.
Still our responsibility. So we'll wait to see the development of that and specifics on that rule.
Sir?
I predict that there will be, sometimes we don't move until there's an incident. There will be an incident. There will be a crash. There will be probably fatalities because you have so many of these things flying. I hope it doesn't take down a big commercial aircraft. I hope it doesn't have a lot of fatalities, but I think it's inevitable. How many thousands of these drones are now flying? And I've heard different figures from several thousand to 20,000 flying.
I don't know the exact figures. Perhaps Mr. Wynn does, but I think it's important to distinguish. The vast majority of those are amateur operations. They're not covered under the rule, and we're prohibited by statute from regulating that sector of the.
So that still remains the primary risk. Did you want to comment, Mr. Geiger?
To your question on who is in charge of privacy here,
Yeah.
So the FAA is regulating safety, and safety is a very limited mandate when it comes to also providing privacy regulations. So I have some question as to whether or not the FAA could actually put forth rules on privacy. Now,
well, and this was interesting because when we were talking about this several years ago when we crafted this legislation, I was told it was the Department of Justice or judicial matter, that privacy, and it was outside of our realm to regulate. But maybe in this FAA bill, do you think we should have, rather than the president set by edict or whatever, however he did it, what was it, executive order?
Presidential memorandum.
it was,
Presidential
it was a memorandum that
Should we have something in federal law? Final question.
we do think that there should be standards in federal law. The 2012 bill mentioned privacy exactly 0 times, and the privacy issue has absolutely plagued the discussion.
Now,
about
you
this
said the
industry since then.
2012
The
bill.
FAA Modernization and
Yeah,
Reform Act.
I just explained to you, when we started down that path, concerns were raised on both sides of the aisle about privacy. It's a big deal. That we were told it was outside our realm. It was really a judicial matter and outside the purview of the Transportation Committee was considering the legislation at the time.
Sure.
So we're basically without anything except with what the president has set forth, and maybe that should some parts of that should be codified. Is that would be a summary of your
Some
position?
parts of it, although what the president set forth is also quite limited. The Department of Justice essentially says that, I mean, there's some good things in the policy guidance from the Department of Justice, but it is also very limited. It says that they'll respect laws, they'll use UAS for an authorized use and harmonize with the Fourth Amendment, but it doesn't provide any additional protection really beyond what is in current law. The NTIA process is focused just on commercial drones. So, the NTIA process is not going to touch government use.
Great.
So-
Okay. Well, let's go to the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.